Welcome to Fresh Catholic, a podcast for those who are converting, reverting, or simply want a fresh perspective of the Catholic faith to help them to open their hearts and minds to become closer to the love and goodness of Christ. My daily prayer is that I will be a bright light to others, to be filled with the love and light of Christ, so that when people look at me, they see Him radiating out from me for His glory. Hello and welcome. I'm Lori Balderas, and I'm so happy you're here. So I just want to start with a big thank you. I want to thank my Patreons. I want to thank the people who are going to my store and buying our Fresh Catholic merchandise at freshcatholic.com. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All this help is keeping my podcast going. So I really appreciate you. If you haven't gone yet, please go check out that store. There are so many cool things on there, and we're coming up with new things all the time. So please check it out. And the Patreon, go check that out because you get free merchandise there. If you sign up and you go to a different level, there's different merchandise that you will get included in your monthly fee. So check that out, please. Also, I want to thank Santa Clara High School for having me come this week and talk about the topic of marriage to the junior class, the sacrament of marriage. So I really appreciate the opportunity to do that. I'm going to spend the entire morning there, so I'm looking forward to it. Also, please follow me on social media at Fresh Catholic on Facebook and Instagram. I'm still doing my daily videos, and I know a lot of people really like them. And I have my one little friend, Iris, and boy, if I don't get that posted, she texts me and says, Lori, where's my video of the day? So I'm glad people are enjoying that. Now, here we are with Simon Balderas. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
Oh, my goodness. I just love having you on my podcast.
I like being here, too.
He doesn't love it, but he likes it.
Yeah.
I need you to do this with me, so you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anyway, so today we're going to cover a topic about loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
And they struggle with it at all times of the year, but I think especially at Christmas time.
Yeah, especially.
And I think Christmas time can be such a happy, beautiful time. It can also be very sad and lonely.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to talk about this subject today, but I do not want this to be a downer episode. So don't throw in the towel, everybody. Don't start the episode and go, oh, this is just sad and doom and gloom. It won't be. There's going to be some positive solutions and positive ideas incorporated into this episode. So don't give up.
Yes.
It'll be okay. But I know, Simon, this was a subject that you in particular wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, I did. And I do also want to come from a perspective of a man's perspective, because I know statistically men really, really suffer in this area in life, loneliness. They're more likely not to reach out. And the older you get, the less likely they are to connect with friends, lose friends. If they're married and they lose a spouse, boy, are they really going to face some loneliness. And it starts early. It starts when men are young, or when you're a little boy even. It's just the way that our society is structured. And so I believe that men really struggle quite a bit when it comes to loneliness.
Okay, well, we'll talk in more depth about that in a little bit, but I appreciate that perspective because obviously I'm not a man. I don't have that perspective.
Thank goodness.
And so that's one reason I like having you on here, because it is a male perspective. So I appreciate that. So put a little pin in that, and we'll come back to that. But a lot of people are lonely at Christmas time in particular because maybe there's family rifts. Maybe there has been a death of a spouse. I know my dad died right before Christmas. So my mom kind of was in shock, to be honest with you. I think we all were, but her in particular. And sometimes you have a family member or a friend who has passed away also, or maybe somebody has moved away
or they're in the military, or they're in the hospital. So there's all different types of loneliness and levels of loneliness.
Yeah.
And it isn't just for this time of year, but I just think we're talking about it because I do believe it's more highlighted at this time of year.
Right.
Because I also think there's a thing where we as humans, especially in this day and age, do a lot of comparing, especially on social media. You see that family that looks like everything is perfect and great and wonderful. Of course, you're not seeing the behind the scenes thing. That draws even more loneliness to people because they're like, oh, well, they're all having a great time and I'm just alone.
Right.
Or, they're with their husband, but mine just died. Or my husband just left me. I think we do a lot of comparing, especially at this time of year. And we put our best foot forward on social media, of course, all during the year, but especially at this time. So I think that causes people extra loneliness because they're looking at somebody and going, well, I don't have that. I'm by myself.
The one thing about that too, Lori, is I know you're going to draw a distinction between what it means to be lonely and what it means to be alone, and I think it's really important that you do that because as you know, I really like to be alone. I love my alone time. I can really focus on whatever projects I'm working on, whether it's an artistic project or a writing project or whatever. I need to have this solitude. So I enjoy that. But I don't feel alone. And I don't feel alone for a lot of reasons, but it's not the same as being lonely, right?
Right. They're two completely different things. So, first of all, I want to give you a couple of facts about loneliness. And then I am going to say the difference between being alone and being lonely.
Okay.
And so I'm reading these, everybody. So these are not off the top of my head. So the definition of loneliness is sadness because one has no friends or company.
Okay.
Very short and to the point. The difference between being alone and being lonely are this. Being alone is a physical state where you are physically by yourself. And being lonely is an emotional state where you are feeling alone or disconnected from others.
Okay.
Those are very basic distinguishing between the two.
Mm-hmm.
The true meaning of loneliness is a state of mind. It causes people to feel empty, alone, and unwanted. People who are lonely crave human contact, but their state of mind makes it difficult to form connections with others.
Right. I could even go one step further from that description. And, well, hey, I've been lonely before. And a lot of times when I have been in that state, there's a sense of desperation. It's like a panic, like nothing can help me. That's when you feel really alone.
Yeah. I also think it's my personal opinion or my personal experience is because I also like to be alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very independent person. I was raised to be very independent. And that's one of the gifts my parents gave me is I'm never bored.
Right.
I can be alone and I'm fine. But I'll tell you what is the painful part of the loneliness part is that I feel that I'm being disregarded or that I'm the unwanted word when I said that really struck me because I've had that where I can be alone and I'm fine and I'll find stuff to do. It's when, you know what they say, this FOMO, fear of missing out?
No, I've never heard that.
Oh, you've never heard that? Isn't he so cute? Fear of missing out.
Okay.
So like when you see people doing things and you're not included and you're at home alone, but your friends are out doing things and they're posting things, or you find out that they've had a party and you weren't invited, that sort of thing. So that doesn't feel very good. That's when I've had loneliness.
Do you think that doesn't feel good more to women than to men? Because when you say that, like you're not involved, you're not being socially included, a lot of men are, I don't want to say antisocial, but sort of avoid social functions like, oh, I got to go to the family picnic.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That is so true.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about how men feel because I think men are so mysterious sometimes where it's like, because I always think, oh, are they sad? Are they that they're not getting to do things? But you're right.
Yeah.
They're more like, ugh, I would rather just be home watching football by myself.
I know that you and I have been in functions, and you know I'm kind of dying inside. And you just look at me and we give these nonverbal cues like, can we get out of here?
And I pick up on it.
Yeah. And you say, you want to go, don't you?
And then we exit very nicely. I think that's interesting. But that's kind of how I distinguish between being alone and being lonely. So I do want to say, I don't know how accurate these statistics are, and they're not that many, but who suffers from loneliness? Everyone is at risk.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean everybody suffers from it, but everyone is at risk of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't kind of keep track of it, I think everyone's at risk.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found out was a third of adults 45 and older report feeling lonely, and about a quarter of adults 65 and older are considered to be socially isolated. Now, I think during COVID, we all know one of the horrific parts about COVID, there were so many horrific parts, but one of them, in my opinion, was that a lot of the elderly were in nursing homes and rest homes and their families couldn't go.
I know.
That was heartbreaking to them.
Yeah.
And I think it's just continued on. And I think that was a devastating thing. They were passing away and their family members couldn't be there with them.
Right. All these post-COVID changes that have happened, I think they're really interesting when it comes to loneliness, because a lot of people had to adapt and work at home.
Right.
Now people want to stay home.
We'll be right back.
Rising anti-Semitism. New generations redefining how they connect with Jewish traditions. Changing dynamics among Jews around the globe. Take a deep dive into these topics and more on Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, the podcast brought to you by the Jewish Federation of Palm Beach County. Hear from the thought leaders, politicians, scholars, and artists at the forefront of Jewish life today. Subscribe to Mosaic, Exploring Jewish Issues, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Well, and I remember when COVID first started, you and I were secretly like, this is great.
I know. Well, I've always worked at home, but...
I know. But it was kind of like, I didn't mind it for the first couple weeks.
Yeah. You know what I liked about it, honestly? It was so surreal to go outside and walk the streets, like walk down, and all these stores are closed.
Right.
And there's just nobody to be found. I would do that a lot,
right.
Go for walks.
Same.
It was just empty streets.
Yeah, it was weird.
Yeah. It made me think a lot.
Yeah. So I do feel like COVID really did not help our elderly people. And certainly they're already kind of isolated, and then that just made it even worse. So like the people that would normally go visit them couldn't even go visit them.
Right. All of the social norms that we're used to, going to church, shut down.
Right.
All of that stuff. I mean, getting together in any sort of sizable group was against the law, I guess.
Right. That really definitely fed the loneliness factor. And I think that's just really sad. So I just thought those were interesting statistics. But then you and I were kind of talking before we started recording and saying, who are the people that are in the loneliness group? Like, who would that be? Mm. And I think there's some people to talk about, like we just talked about the elderly. Mm-hmm. That's one group. I think people that are maybe socially awkward and they're not quite sure how to make friends, especially in this world of social media where people aren't having human interaction. They're doing it online. One of the things I've been noticing, because I kind of like dissect social media a little bit, and I kind of can see who's interested in who and all these things. So I have these two friends, and I can tell my man friend is interested in my lady friend, and they don't live in the same state. And he's like trying really hard. He's being very sweet with her. He's very interested, but they're not interacting face to face.
Right.
So I know he's very lonely. I know he's been lonely for a very long, long time. And she's lonely. They can't kind of connect because they live in different states.
Right. It's hard to make that digital connection seem real.
Right.
It's really sad. And, you talk about people being at risk. all men are at risk because of the way our society has formed.
Yes.
It's different in different countries, but in the United States specifically, men have it rough.
Yes.
Because there's social norms that are imposed upon us that create lonely people. For example, it's harder for men to show emotion. It's actually kind of looked down upon. So men have the same emotional needs as a woman or anybody else, but to say to a friend, hey buddy, I really love you, man. They might be able to say it like that, but to look them in the eye and say, I love you and thank you. So much easier for a woman to connect that way with a friend. For a man, it's just not that easy.
Right.
And it's looked down upon. As a matter of fact, some might say, if a guy came up to another guy and said, I love you, looked him in the eye, some might go, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. They're gay.
Yeah, they're gay, or they got some kind of problem. They're emotionally volatile. Oh my God, their emotions coming out of a man. Oh my God. And, for me personally, I just happen to be a type of person that has worn his heart on his sleeve pretty much my whole life. So I know that firsthand, and that people have looked at me kind of odd. I know I've told you in the past, I think my mom held me too much when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I just really am kind of an emotional sponge, and I happen to be kind of artistically inclined. So I have to draw upon emotion. And I'm also a really big observer of people. And so I see this so clearly. I see so many men suffering in despair and loneliness.
Right. And, I've said in past episodes that I'm just very pro-man. I know our world is not very pro-man right now. It's just not. Anything that can be blamed on men and men bashed, it's a big problem.
Right. And toxic masculinity and all this stuff. Plus, these gender roles are being blurred, and it's just people can't find their place. And so I think more and more pressure is put upon, especially men, but everybody as well.
Right. But I do think what that does, and you and I had talked about this before, men are kind of at a disadvantage, not kind of, they really are at a disadvantage as far as building relationships.
Right.
And so I get exactly what you're saying, where it's like, men should be able to say to another man, I love you, man, and let's hang out, and nobody to think that's weird. Remember back in the day when you had your buddies?
Yeah.
Like you had a buddy?
Yeah.
And it wasn't any sexual thing. It was that you had a buddy.
Yeah. I just was thinking about a scene in a movie, not a great movie, but it was a movie called Superbad. And it was about these guys who go out and do all these shenanigans and pranks and all kinds of stuff. And there's this one scene. It is such an awkward, and you could feel it in the audience, uncomfortable moment. They're all snuggled up in sleeping bags after a night of just going crazy, and they're all snuggled in their own sleeping bags. And Jonah Hill goes, I love you, man. And the other guy goes, I love you too. And he goes, no, I love you. I really, really love you. And the other guy goes, I really, really, and then just goes back and forth like that. Uncomfortable. People think that's so odd, but they're just two guys like really chumming together. They had such a great night, and then they're just, really expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that men specifically can't do that outwardly.
Yeah. I don't know this statistic, but I do know we're having a major problem right now where people are not getting married as much, which means they're not having children as much. And one of the problems is because people look down on men, and so they're not able to have the courtship with women and be looked at in a positive way so that then they can get married and have children. It's a problem. And what's happening is I do know we have many male friends that are very lonely.
Yeah.
And they want to get married, and they want to find a nice girl or a nice woman, and they want to settle down, but they're at such a disadvantage. So what that's going to do is that's going to cause this big loneliness shift more and more in men, because like you and I were talking about before, women typically, let's say they have a breakup or a death of their spouse, they're going to go out and be social.
Right.
They're going to get picked up by their friends. They're going to be social. And even if they don't remarry, even if they don't find another person, they have such a network because they're accepted by everybody. The women of like, oh, we need to take care of her. We need to make sure she's having fun. But the men kind of get put to the side and isolated.
Yeah, I think that men don't know how to connect. It's been lost in translation. I heard the story about a guy who grew up in a military family, so he moved around a lot. And one of the things he did to cope with his life was he stopped making friends, close relationships with other guys, because he would just have to move like every couple of years. So he never really had any close friends. Long story short, he got married, he had a kid, he got divorced, and he found himself in his 50s really without any friends, really isolated, by himself, feeling really lonely. And so he would come home every day, and he had this wooden post in his yard. And he would come home every day and he would hug his post.
Oh.
Every day he would hug his post. And he said to himself, man, I got a problem here. This isn't right. I mean, that sounds weird.
Yeah.
Right? But it's become so evident that men don't know how. They don't know what to do.
No.
They're lost.
And I don't know, because I'm not a man, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like men would call another guy and say, hey, let's go get a drink, or hey, let's go play basketball, or hey, they should be able to do that. And it should be just like normal guy stuff.
Yeah.
And I know that you're different, and I know that but I do think my experience with you out in the world with a lot of our friends is everybody knows that you are soft and kind, and you do say, I love you, and you do say, you are caring towards them. And I don't think they look down on you. I think you've just always been like that.
Yeah.
But I think if you were with a bunch of strangers, they'd probably go, what's this guy about?
No, I mean, my friends know that I am like that, but it has been a problem growing up. People had conceptions of me that were not accurate at all.
Yeah.
And, one of the scenes and I'm going to mention another movie because I'm a big movie guy. We just saw it over Thanksgiving, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy and Steve Martin. There's that one scene where they fall asleep they were in this like really tiny twin bed together, and they wake up, and all of a sudden John Candy realizes he's got his head on his shoulder, and it seems like a little romantic.
They're snuggling.
And they wake up, and all of a sudden they realize, oh my God, I'm snuggling with another guy. And they just immediately start talking about football.
Yeah.
And, just to like, ew, this is, and so that's what I'm talking about. That feeling in that moment where it's just kind of wrong. It doesn't feel right.
Right. I just think that we're also very aware of the connotation of, you should be able to be friends with a man and give him a hug and tell him you love him without anybody thinking you're a couple.
Right.
You should be able to do that.
Uh-huh.
And that's a whole other topic we could get into later, not about loneliness.
And I think one more component to that is that it's important, if you're raising a young man or a little boy, to give them the knowledge and the understanding that it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to express yourself. It's okay to communicate and say, hey, I'm feeling X.
Right.
And I need to do something about it, because the more people keep those types of things inside, the more they become isolated.
Right. And also you were telling me about when there's a couple and the wife dies, the husband dies soon after, because
it's not uncommon for an elderly couple when the wife dies that the husband dies shortly after.
And you and I had talked about, again, the woman typically will get very easily taken care of. Everybody rallies around the woman, and they will, typically women are more social. They just have that in them to kind of have people around them.
It's just the way that our society has created these ideas. We were talking earlier of some of the solutions to combat this loneliness. I won't get into it, but I do want to say this one thing, and it's a stereotype. It's a stereotype for me, because this is the first thing that came to my mind when I said, we should go visit the elderly in rest homes, especially if they don't have family that come to visit.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing that popped into my mind is a little old lady that's alone.
Mm-hmm.
I never really think about the little old man that's also alone. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah.
It's so ingrained in us.
Now I'm going to reference a movie.
Yep.
One of my very favorite movies of all time is The Holiday. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Get it. It's wonderful. I watch it every Christmas. There's a little old man in it, and Kate Winslet's character finds this little old man, and he's very lonely, and he eats by himself, and she ends up really becoming friends with him. It's nothing romantic. It's not to be thought of in those terms. It's that she sees that he's alone and lonely and his wife has passed away, and she befriends him. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful relationship in that movie. And it just gave me hope that you don't have to look at men in a negative light, whatever age they are, and take everybody for what they are. There's great men and great women, and there's stinkers in either sex. So I just love that in that movie, that she really takes him on and just like brightens up his life.
Yeah.
You could so easily do that, and it doesn't have to be something that turns into something bad.
Some people think about, well, I got to give of myself. I got to spend this time with this old guy, and it might be kind of boring. But actually, especially in that movie, that little old man, he has a lot of wisdom.
Yes.
And he really gives her a lot of wisdom.
Yes. They help each other.
They help each other. So those are the unexpected things that if you reach out like that, you're probably going to be enriched in some way.
So before we head on to the positive solutions of loneliness, I just want to say, when we're feeling like submerged by loneliness, we should try to focus on what we do have instead of what we don't have.
Yes.
Because Satan wants everybody to feel alone. Satan wants you to feel bad about yourself. Satan wants you to be mad at God. And remember, Satan is the scatterer. Satan is the divider.
Right.
And so he wants you to be in despair. He wants you to be miserable. Mm-hmm. He wants you to think there's no hope. And I know you and I were talking about, not that this is isolated to men, but you were talking about how men handle loneliness and despair sometimes.
Yes, I think men don't handle it very well, actually. I think especially when you add the extra pressure of spiritual slings and arrows being kind of thrown at you and you're really in despair. Men have a tendency to do the tough thing. Hey, I'm going to go out and buy a bottle of whiskey, or I'm going to go out and get smashed, or I'm going to go out and maybe take some drugs. They look for relief in the most dangerous and unhealthy ways.
And destructive ways.
Maybe they're going to get into pornography or some other vice or temptation that's just going to lead to more and more despair.
Yeah, and more loneliness. It just feeds that.
Right.
Like if they're seeking out pornography, they're not seeking out an actual woman.
Right.
So that's also a big problem our world is having right now.
Yeah.
Is that because women are rejecting the men are turning more to pornography because that's the only thing they know to do. In my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they generally turn to the drugs, the alcohol, all these things because they can't go to somebody and say, oh my gosh, I'm so lonely.
Right.
Oh my gosh, I'm in despair. Women are just the floodgates open and they'll tell anybody.
Right.
And they'll get a response. But the men, like you said earlier, they just dive
head first into a bottle. Yeah.
Right. And so, that just adds to more isolation. That adds to more loneliness.
Yeah.
Because then they're just at home drinking alone, and that's just feeding it.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Satan wants. Satan doesn't want men to get married, and he doesn't want them to have children, and he doesn't want them to have a positive life.
Yeah. In my mind, like I mentioned, I like being alone. I've never really fully felt alone. And I'll tell you why. I just happen to be a really just visual person. And I've always imagined being surrounded at least by one angel, a guardian angel, for an example, kind of like a Jiminy Cricket conscience on my shoulder. Sometimes I've spoken to him out loud, asked for him to help me in a moment of a spiritual battle because they're there to help fight other bad forces and evil things. And so I think adopting a mindset where you're aware, spiritually aware that you're not alone. Jesus is there, hold his hand out to you anytime you ask, ready to comfort.
Right.
You just got to do it.
Again, Satan puts it in your head that you're alone. You're alone and you're worthless and nobody loves you, and just feeds in your head, especially when you're in a vulnerable state like that.
Yeah.
And then if you can shift your thinking and realize you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
You have an angel. You have Christ with you. You have God with you. You have the Holy Spirit with you.
Right.
All the time. 24/7.
Right.
All the time. But you have to be aware that they're there. Open your heart and your mind and your eyes that they're there.
If you really believe that they're there, I have a feeling that you might experience things that are kind of out of this world. Like the other day, you and I have been going through some stressful business stuff, and we were eating dinner, and you got a phone call, and you said, I got to take this, I got to leave the table. And I just sat there and closed my eyes and just started to pray quietly, and I was waiting for you. And you're gone for quite some time, at least 10 or 15 minutes. And so I finished praying, and I opened my eyes, and I looked down at my phone, and I've been using the Hallow app lately, but I haven't used it in a while. And I looked down at my phone, and there it was, a prayer to your guardian angel, the guardian angel prayer. I did not put that on my phone. I did not click on the Hallow app. I did not open it. But when I opened
your eyes, there it was.
There it was, sitting there wide open. So I said, I'm going to play this right now. So those are the kind of the unexpected things that you might experience being spiritually minded all the time.
Yeah. Spiritually awake.
Yes.
Because I'll get in moments of, I don't want to say depression, but kind of down. And I've said this in other episodes. I'll be on my walk, and all of a sudden I look up and there's a bunny or there's a butterfly. And it just makes me feel like God reminding me that he's with me, because he knows those little things immediately perk me up because I have my eyes open to them. Not on the days when I'm texting or on my phone or not focusing. So I purposely make those days to no phone, no nothing, just on my walk, to purposely feel God's presence with me so that I'm never alone. So let's talk about positive solutions.
Okay.
Now, when I say these things, I just want to kind of preface it by saying I am not trying to brush past people's loneliness. I'm not trying to discount it or not be understanding. It's not about that. I understand people are lonely, and there's all levels of it. And so please don't think that I'm just kind of disregarding, or I can't think of the word I want to use, watering it down or anything, and being uncaring. But I just think we should try to talk about some things that work.
Okay.
Or that I think would be helpful. So some ways that a person can stop being so lonely and learn to be comfortable in their own company. And when I say that, that means you're alone. But like we've just said, God is always with you. God, the Holy Spirit, Jesus, they're always with you. Okay? So when I'm saying in your own company, I just mean that other humans aren't with you.
Right.
Okay. One of the things I want to talk about is I had an experience of being alone and being bordering on loneliness, okay? When you and I were separated for over 3 years, which if you haven't heard that episode, the marriage episode with Simon and I about our separation and ultimate reuniting, I was alone for every holiday for over 3 years.
Yeah.
Every holiday. And at first, that was really devastating to me because I'm a big holiday girl. And I love being with my family on the holidays. And so because of our marital issues, my family distanced from me as well. So I wasn't getting to be with you, and I wasn't getting to be with my family. So this was becoming a big problem. And I was feeling very down and very depressed. And I was in therapy, and my therapist really gave me some great advice. And she said, Lori, you need to learn how to be alone and for it to be all right. And I know you're hurt, and I know you're sad that you can't be with people on the holiday, on all these holidays and special events, or just on a Sunday, or just on a weekend that I was alone, right? Because I lived alone. So what she told me to do is make your own plans and have a plan for your day and make it things you look forward to, that you want to do. You know, she wasn't Catholic. She knew I was devout Catholic. She knew that Christ was a big part of my life. So she said to me, pretend that he's there sitting there with you all the time. And when you're in bed, he's laying next to you, not in a romantic way, but in a comforting way, that he's right there. So I had this body pillow and I would put it behind me. And I would just imagine that Jesus was just laying next to me for comfort. And that really helped me. And so I would come up with these plans for the holidays and I would just look forward to it. And she said, if your family or Simon is able to spend the holiday or the weekend with you, great, then do those things with them. If they're not, do them anyway. You're going to be okay. But make it things that you look forward to, that you want to do. Well, this became great. I mean, I was getting real good at it.
Yeah.
And I was feeling really good. And I would even say to God, I just need to spend a day alone with you, Jesus. And then I would just do all these very meaningful, quiet, comforting things that would get me through the day. And at first it was kind of hard, but then I really got good at it, almost too good. And I told you, I might not want to get back together if we don't do it soon, because I'm getting real set in this.
Yeah.
And of course, God doesn't want that. He wanted us to get back together. But I think it really strengthened me to be able to be alone and that it was okay. And I'm not saying I didn't have sad moments. I'm not saying on Christmas, Easter, all these days where I was sitting home alone, that I wasn't crying.
Right.
I would cry. I would be heartbroken. I would see what people were doing. It was like a dagger to my heart, but I got myself out of it. I really had to process that and to be okay with being alone, but knowing I was sitting there with Christ.
Right.
And he was just always with me and I could feel it. People must think I'm crazy. Maybe not everybody, but I could just feel him next to me, holding my hand, sitting there with me. And it just was so peaceful and calm. And that's the only thing that got me through. It's literally the only thing that got me through. I probably would have lashed out or been in despair and just in a puddle on the floor. But I wasn't. I started to be that way. And my therapist knew it. And so I really am grateful for her challenging me to do that, because I think ultimately that ended up helping me to be a calmer, quieter person.
So having a plan, and it's not just a plan where you just imagine Jesus with you. It's like, I'm going to watch my favorite movie. I'm going to make my favorite little meal, all those kinds of things.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to go on my favorite walk.
Yes. And to be okay with all that, but to have a plan for it, just like when you're planning an event with your family, where you're like, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do this and it's going to be so fun and we're all going to be together. Well, I would make a plan for myself that I would look forward to and go, oh, this is going to be great. It's going to be beautiful.
Right.
And it was. Table for two, me and Jesus. So I did really feel good. Now I'm happy to be back with you, so don't get me wrong. But that really helped me. So I encourage people, if you are finding yourself that you have to be alone, don't sit and wallow in it and go, oh, I'm going to watch this horrible show. I'm going to eat this awful dinner. No, make it into something that you can look forward to get you through that.
Right. And can I tell you a little bit of a flip side to that too? Because I know you were alone. I know that you're absolutely alone without anybody physically with you.
Right.
I, on the other hand, wasn't alone. I had my kids. I had visits from my family. I had a lot of stuff going on during the holidays and food and all that kind of stuff that kind of normal people do. But to be honest with you, I was lonely inside. So you can be lonely when you're amongst people.
Right.
So I think that's important to remember, because at least for me, half of me was gone, and that was you. I wanted to be with you. I didn't want you to be alone, but we had the same with our family, that we had these obligations that we had to go through. And if you are with a bunch of people in the middle of a crowd in a function or what have you, and you're feeling lonely, what might you suggest you could do in that case?
I mean, if you're just kind of going through the motions because you feel obligated to do it and nobody's caring that you are feeling bad inside, you've said to me before, where you've said to people, you haven't even asked about where Lori is or if Lori's okay. You've said to your children, do you know that Lori's sitting home alone?
Right.
So for people to just not care about that and brush over that and know that you're lonely and you're having a hard time, but they're just going to continue on selfishly and have their fun time. That's weird.
Yeah, I think maybe what you're saying perhaps is that it's okay to vocalize your disappointment in a way where people realize, what's the matter, Simon?
Yeah.
Well, I'm Miss Lori.
Yeah.
I know she's sitting all alone, and that's no fun.
Right. And I think you did say that.
I did. And that helped. It didn't take the sting out completely. And it was no fun at all.
No.
But the one thing I know that you and I did is we always had the hope, and we always had our eyes set on something in the future.
Right.
And that helped, but it didn't solve that problem 100% at all.
But I do think it's really valid what you're saying is that I was literally sitting home alone, lonely, but you were in a group of people lonely.
Yes.
So, it's a blurry sort of thing. And there's different levels of loneliness.
Right. I do think that the answer to that question is there's no real good solution.
Yeah.
So, if anything, if you are internally just dying in a situation like that, you're just going to have to quietly pray.
Yeah.
Put a rosary in your pocket.
Yes.
And say some decades.
Yeah. Or even separate yourself for a moment and go collect yourself and pray in quiet. But yeah, we're not experts here, people. We're just saying our experiences. And so, we might not have all the best answers, but I think learning how to be in a situation and being able to make it through, I think is important. And so more solutions, more positive solutions. You probably should open up to your friends and family and say, I'm feeling really lonely. I've said that to my kids. I've said, I'm not getting to see you guys. I would like to see you. They don't want to be called out like that. But if you don't speak up and say you're feeling neglected or lonely, people might not think it matters to you. So I think being honest with your friends and family about how you're feeling is important. It's hard, but it's important.
Yeah.
And they just might not be aware. And then if they ignore it, then maybe you need to find new friends.
And I've had this experience where the littlest person in the whole group, like a little kid, like my little granddaughter, sees that I might even have a tear in my eye a little bit. And for her to come here and just, hug my leg, like, gosh, what a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And just get some joy out of that.
Yes.
That moment.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And along with that is work on healing relationships. Because again, a lot of the loneliness comes from broken families or family rifts or friends that have split apart. Try to heal those relationships so that you can come back together and have a more fulfilling life. Going to find new people is fine and great, but if you can try to heal your relationships, you should. If they're not going to be healed, then go make some new connections. And I have a really cute story about two people that met at Our Lady of the Assumption Church during COVID. So speaking of new connections, they were both widowed, and we were kind of watching them. The staff was kind of watching them from a distance, and they started out being very far apart in the pews because we had to be 6 feet apart. And they had masks on and for the entirety of all this going on. And a little at a time, they kept moving closer and closer to each other in the pew. And then they ended up sitting during Mass, at daily Mass. And then, lo and behold, they fall in love with each other and they got married. And I was the wedding coordinator for Ed and Loretta. And it was so adorable because they were both lonely.
Yeah.
And they found each other at church, and then we laughed because she took the mask off and we thought she was this beautiful woman.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was really sweet that they, in their older age, that they found each other during COVID and they got married, and they weren't lonely anymore. It was beautiful. Yeah. It was so beautiful. So you're never too old to find some new connections. Mm-hmm. And then I suggest, if you're really lonely, try therapy. Just as Catholics, be honest about being Catholic and that you have certain things that are important to you so that they don't drag you down the wrong path of how to handle things, because they're not generally going to bring up that, oh, well, Jesus is sitting next to you. But, you should be able to say that things like that, and they should value what you're saying and not dodge off on a path.
And I think that solution of therapy is really important for that group of men out there, because therapy is a place where you can be emotional and you're supposed to be emotional. And like I was saying before, sometimes men just don't even know what to do.
Yeah.
So therapy is a place where you can get, at the very least, some practical advice.
Right. And be able to be yourself without being judged. Yeah. Same at church, I think. I think you could talk to a priest and you could really open up and not feel judged.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say that. I suggest if you're lonely, get a dog or a cat.
Yes.
They are really helpful and they will give you love and loyalty. And I think it's a brilliant idea.
As you know, I had a fear of dogs for a long, long time. I got attacked by dogs when I was a kid several times, and I was any dog would walk by, what would I do?
Oh, you would cower and hide.
Yeah, I'd cower and go to the other side of the street. I would
shake.
Yeah, it was terrible. But my daughter was struggling emotionally at some point, and she really, really wanted a dog. And she would ask me every day. And finally I broke down and I got this little border collie puppy. And puppies aren't very intimidating, so it was fine and I got used to it. And now this dog is an emotional sponge. And you know that you've seen this dog just really, really pour out love on command.
Yeah.
And it has really helped me. It's helped my daughter, as you know. Emotional support animals, that's a very common thing. And I highly, highly suggest that, even if you have a fear of dogs like I did.
Right. I do think that animals really help with that. I know when I was struggling, when I was married before, with my son's mental illness and things, I had my 6 dogs. And I mean, I wasn't alone. I was in a house full of people, but they were with me all the time. And they gave me that comfort that I needed. So I think it helps you to know that you have somebody with you, like a presence with you that loves you, and they are very loyal. So I suggest that. Get some fresh air. Go out and get some fresh air. Be physically active. That will help your loneliness. Because when you're out in the world, look for those signs from God. Look for the beautiful rainbow. Look for the dolphins jumping in the ocean. Look for the little rabbit. You're in this beautiful universe that God has created. And he's with you. Look at all the beautiful gifts he's showing you. So get some fresh air and get some exercise, and that will help your brain. That will help your loneliness. Look at people and smile at them. That's how you get connections with people. That's how you have human connection. Join a club or a group or a sport. That way you can kind of go do something that's fun and physical, and you'll meet people who have like interests. And then the odds of you finding friends or maybe even a love interest in those groups is highly likely because you're doing something you have in common. You're doing something that you have the same interest in. Don't go to a bar. You know, I used to spend a great deal of time in bars when I was in my early 20s. And you're not going to find I'm not going to make a big statement like that. You could find your soulmate in a bar, I suppose. But I think try to go find your soulmate at church, at a church function, in a bookstore, in a club, in a group. The odds of it being more quality that way, whether it's a love interest or just a friend.
Right. Yeah, I think the point you're making is just make an effort to reach out.
If you just sit in your house in a corner in the dark, when people say they're praying, okay, pray. Praying's great. But don't just sit in a corner praying. Pray. And then go out in the world.
Yeah, I'd like to put a caveat to that because I think a lot of people get this wrong, and a lot of people reach out socially to people online. And I think there's something to be said about just going out and physically interacting with people. Forget the online thing.
Right.
Especially when you're lonely.
Right.
Because that can lead who knows where, weird places. So
it's not real.
That's not real.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing is we've all gotten off on this social media thing, and you don't know what's real and what isn't. You don't know who to trust and who not to trust.
Yeah.
And when you see them in real life, that's kind of what I was saying about those friends I have where they're talking online And I happen to know both of them are lovely people.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't got to interact with each other face to face.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't want to interject. I don't want them to know I'm watching them doing this, but I'm thinking, I wish they could meet up and see each other face to face, and then it's legitimate.
Right. And I do want to put an exclamation point on joining a group because, as you know, when I was in college, I didn't talk to anybody for my first 2 years in college.
Right.
A single person.
Right.
Until I made my first film. And I had to. I was forced to, but we had a group of people, and then my social life kind of exploded in college from then. But I had to at least make that effort.
Right.
I remember walking, I guess I was lonely, not like total despair, but I was definitely alone. And I remember specifically, I would ask myself, I wonder if I'm going to speak to anybody today.
Mm.
This would go on for weeks.
Yeah. People do get into this spot where they go for so long not interacting with people or not talking to people or not putting themselves out there
Right.
and trying things, that then it just becomes a habit, and then you become very lonely and very isolated. Mm-hmm. It's something that you do have to be a willing participant. And again, if you're at home alone and you're enjoying being home alone, great. We're talking about the people who are struggling with being isolated and suffering from loneliness. Another thing you could do is start a hobby. You could read, draw, paint, cook, learn a new skill, learn to do something. And again, it helps you to pass the time and you're enjoying doing something by yourself. But you could do those things in a group and, again, find like-minded people. You could travel.
I got mixed feelings about that one.
Well, there are people that like to go in groups. Like they'll join a group. They're by themselves, but they're in a group.
That's true.
I wouldn't want to do that. I'm just offering a suggestion.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, the only reason I'm saying that is because, you know, I traveled the world by myself in a very lonely, purposeful fashion. I was all alone, and it wasn't healthy for me.
I'm not saying it's for everybody. I'm just saying you could expand your horizons. You could go with a group.
Yeah, I agree.
And then you're at least, again, with people who are doing something that you're interested in.
Right.
And you might find somebody on that trip.
Right. And do it safely. I didn't do it safely.
No, you didn't. You could also volunteer. I remember there was a time in my life where I was estranged from my daughter and my grandchild. And one of my friends suggested I volunteer for a group. It was actually the Crisis Pregnancy Center. And to work with those girls who are pregnant, they're estranged from their families. And I went and did volunteer work there. And it kind of like filled a void. So you could volunteer, and then it's not just all about you and your loneliness. It's about how you can help others and how you can be of service to others. And then that also is, you're taking a negative and turning it into a positive. If you have time because you're lonely and you don't have people around you, then use your time to help others. And then last but not least, seek out help at church. Those people at church are really going to understand what you need spiritually, what you need to fill your heart and soul, and that's with Jesus. So I just was realizing this today because I was doing some promos for our Advent episode, and the 4 themes of Advent are hope, peace, joy, and love. If you can think about those things when you're lonely, if you can think about, how can I be hopeful? How can I be at peace with this? Like, what can I do to be hopeful about my situation? What can I do that's proactive to be hopeful so that I'm not sitting here in despair? What can I do to be at peace with my alone time? What can I do that brings me joy, whether I'm with people or not? And how can I find love and feel love in my loneliness? And again, I believe that's with the Lord.
Right. Yeah.
So if you can focus on your relationship with Christ and remember that God loves you, you are never alone. Stay content in your heart and soul with Him, because He's never going to fail. He's never going to leave you. Humans, they make mistakes. Humans are disappointing. Humans make you hurt sometimes. but God will never do that to you. He just won't. So in closing, I want to read some scripture passages that I hope, and I'll put in the show notes what these are, the Psalms. But I just want to read these, and these hopefully will help you, and you can refer to them. In Psalm 34, scripture says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." A prayer from Psalm 25 is, "I am lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart and free me from my anguish." Jesus knew what it was to be lonely, but he said, "Yet I am not alone, for my Father is with me." He also said, "Fear not, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you." I think those are beautiful words to think about.
Awesome.
So I hope that you have a beautiful holiday time. I know we're still in Advent and Christmas is coming. And I hope this episode has helped you. I hope it has helped you to feel you're not alone. Me and Simon are here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Lord is with you. And I hope things turn around for you. I hope you find peace in your heart and soul. And thank you. Love you. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. Now go out and be a bright light in someone's life. And remember, be focused, be faithful, and be fresh.
Fresh Catholic is produced, edited, and recorded at Wonder Mouse Studios in Ventura, California.